Masha Sedova, co-founder of Elevate Security, has made her mark in cybersecurity through her practical and human-centered approach to the field. Under her leadership, Elevate Security's innovative platform significantly reduced user-related risks for enterprises. This led to its acquisition by Mimecast in 2024, where she now serves as Vice President of Human Risk Strategy. Honored by Fast Company in 2021 for her creativity in business, she previously honed her expertise at Salesforce, where she pioneered engaging security awareness initiatives through gamification, thereby redefining industry standards. A top-rated speaker at Black Hat and RSA, she also supports tech inclusivity as a CompTIA Spark board member.
Hello, this is Dr. Matthew Canham, the Executive Director of the Cognitive Security Institute. Many security departments find themselves chronically understaffed with minimal budgets, which means that they must stretch their resources to the maximum extent possible. By focusing on the most at-risk employees, security departments make the most of their budgets and maximize their security return on investment. If you find these talks interesting, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. You may learn more about Cognitive Security Institute and learn how to become involved in this rapidly growing community by visiting our website at cognitivesecurity.institute. We hope that you enjoy this presentation to the Cognitive Security Institute.
Thanks so much, Matt. And it was definitely mutual when you find somebody that you can sit across the table with and geek out and go very deep on topics that you both feel very passionate about. Is a rarity and wonderful. But as Matt said, my name is Masha Sedova, and I have been deep in the space of human risk, wearing a lot of different hats for many, many years now. I guess the place where it's most relevant in my career, I started initially working for the DoD, looking at foreign threats, especially things like social engineering against organizations, and then switched over to Salesforce, where I got to build and run a team internally focused on human risk. And initially it started as insider threat and gradually expanded to all elements of human behavior. And one of the things that I saw while I was in that role was a frustrating lack of data and understanding who is actually risky and why, and who is not risky, and actually are adjusting your programs based on data and metrics. And so I left my comfortable day job as a security executive and started Elevate Security in 2017, co-founded it, and Elevate Security is a platform that measures and manages human risk for organizations globally. And in the start of this year, in January, I had the privilege of selling the company to Mimecast, where I'm now the VP of Human Risk Strategy, and expanding the platform out to a considerable global scale that the startup I started had the privilege to do. So the presentation that I am coming to you all with today is a question that had been rattling around in my mind for quite a while. And that was particularly of the question of, well, why is it that some people are riskier than others? Are there attributes that we can understand and look into that can help us essentially predict who's risky? And so this is a combination of data and research from Elevate Security, from some elements from Mimecast, as well as research done by other incredible researchers in the field. And so happy to share some of my findings with you in the space. With that, let's dive in. I got a lot on the agenda for you all today. And as Matt said, please do type your questions into chat or save them. I'll get to them at the end. I have about half an hour worth of content. Love to take you through the arc of the story, and then we'll go back and dive into some questions. So before we get started, would love to understand if anyone, a pop quiz, does anyone know what these are? I can close the chat. Pins from a lock. That's exactly right. Yeah, tumbler pins. Yeah, I knew this group would get it. So if you, these are, this is the inside of a common padlock, not a padlock, I'm sorry, a key lock for your, let's say your front door. And on the left-hand side and the right-hand side are the pins that go into it that basically prevent it from turning. A key would go in and adjust the pins at the right height so you could turn this tumbler lock on the left-hand side. But if you can look really closely, you're going to see that all the holes are not evenly created, right? Some have a little bit more give. And on the right-hand side, the pins, some of them have indents in them. They're not perfectly smooth, even though these are machine created. This is exactly the thing that lets lock pickers get into locks, because if they were perfectly even, we'd have a much harder time of getting all, you'd have to raise them all at the same time. But lock picking involves raising one pin at a time until you find whichever one is actually binding the tension. Once you release that tension, you move on to the next one. And these imperfections is essentially the thing that unlocks lock picking. But bringing this into our topic du jour, the same is true of the human element. If we were all perfectly uniform as human beings, yeah, you could probably apply some version of a human patch and then move on, but we are not. We are all messy and different and weird and wonderful in our own unique ways. And that in many times is an asset to in our lives and our organizations, but also when it comes to an attacker, it is also to their benefit. There are certain people in organizations who are simply more vulnerable to attack than others. And so the question is, how do we understand who is more risky in our organizations? And so I define risk as two categories. Who is more overall, the overarching definition that I'm looking into is who is more vulnerable to being successfully attacked. If I'm an attacker and going after somebody, like where are my greatest chances? Which lock is going to give me the most give? Which pin is going to give me the most give? And when I take a look at vulnerability, I have two sections here that I want to explore with you all. First is likelihood of even getting attacked, right? It's the number of people who are getting targeted with phishing, social engineering, malware, and so on. And on the right-hand side is who is more likely to fall for that phish, fall for that malware, right? You need both of these hand in hand in order to successfully complete an attack, right? But if I always fall for a phishing attack, but no one ever sends me a phish, I'm great. The opposite is also true, right? If I get phished only once, but I always fall for it, that's a bad day. So we're going to spend time on both of these categories. So the first question, and the reason that I really want to spend some time on these questions is, can we understand some factors reliably that could give us an indication who is going to be more vulnerable to an attack before it actually happens, so that we in turn as defenders can lean into this knowledge and better protect our organizations and these individuals against the more probable future that they're facing. So I'd love for you all to take a mental vote in your brains as to which one of these individuals is riskier, right? They have different profiles. One is a manager, one's an individual contributor, different tenure lengths, kind of rates they have in reading their inbox. Are they leave it unread or drive to inbox 0? What kind of departments are they in? Do they take training on time or late? What factors here matter? Is it that Alice loves cats and Bob loves golf? Which love for you to take mental bets and figure out which of these actually do matter and matter more statistically in a more statistically significant way. So we're going to start with the first category, which is getting attacked. Who is more likely to get attacked? So to start off, I wanted to share that this is hot off the press research that Elevate Security did in partnership with Mimecast and an organization called Scientia, a research group. And what we did is we took a look at number of phishing messages delivered to tens of thousands of employees, and we saw that at a median level, 36%, almost 37% of users actually received no phishing, did not have phishing delivered to their inbox. It's not to say that they're not targeted, right? But it didn't actually get delivered into their inbox. And so in the course of a year. But as we follow up this scale, and it's logarithmic, we can see that the median of people who actually have received a phishing attack, it's about 5.9 a year is a typical rate. But there is a small percentage of poor unfortunate souls who have over 100 a year, all the way up to over 1,000 a year. And so you can imagine that the experience of someone on the left-hand side here is going to be quite different than someone who's on the right-hand side here. And so when we take a look at who some of these people are and what are their attributes, we're going to make this interactive, so please drop this into chat. I'd be curious if you could tell me your guesses for what percentage of employees get phished at least once a month. And I'd like for you to break this down in two answers. For managers and individual contributors, what percentage of managers do you think get at least one phishing email a month and attempted sent to them? And then what percentage of individual contributors do you think do? I see one vote for everyone. Any other guesses? All right, we have a range from 5% to everyone. That covers pretty much everything. So what we see in our data sets is that about 75% of managers get attacked at least once a month, and 45% of individual contributors get attacked. And this doesn't mean that they fall for it, right? That means they are getting sent a phishing attack, right? Which is interesting that, managers are not quite double, but pretty close to double what individual contributors are getting. So that's coverage, right? What percentage of managers of those people who are getting at least one phishing email, those managers and those individual contributors, what do you think is the median? Is the average number of phishing emails that a manager will get and an individual contributor will get? Any guesses? I'll tell you, you're probably not wrong. There's probably an organization somewhere who's going to get the number that you're going to suggest. All right, we got some people say 100. So it actually shows that the median amount. So managers get about 14 emails a month, and an individual contributor is going to get 6 emails a month. And I dropped in the chart to actually show you what it looks like on a month-to-month basis, because there are obviously months where your organization and your team is in the crosshairs of some kind of campaign. So statistically, everyone is getting much higher rates of phishing attacks. And there are months where you have dips and fewer people are getting attacked, but it's still, the trend lines still track. And the orange line that you see here is a manager, and the blue line here you see are the individual contributors. So they both track on the same kind of campaigns, but managers are regularly receiving more phishing emails than an individual contributor. So the last piece I wanted to, before we walk through this, the question is ultimately why. And while I do not have the privilege of talking to some of these black hat attackers to understand their logic around this, some of it is quite common sense, right? So managers tend to have, at least from an external perspective, more access to sensitive information. They may be doing more context switching, which may make them more vulnerable, so better targets. And also, as the nature of their job, may actually have a wider pool of contacts that they have to deal with on a regular basis, internally, externally, vendors, conferences, peers. So not always true, but when we look at that kind of role type, there's more exposure of those emails and that kind of profile. And you can see that even earlier this year, Microsoft executives were part of a targeted campaign for very, very related reasons relating to access and their and the information that they hold. So the last piece. God, there's some extra goodies in here. When I take a look at the geography, which is how, are there any geographic areas that have more risk associated with it than others? And while the data sets we're working with doesn't have 100% global coverage, not every organization has employees in every country. What we did see was that the U.S. consistently ranks highest in number of attacks that employees get, where countries like France, India, and Canada have some of the lowest attack rates of phishing campaigns against their employee base. So if you are an employee in certain geographies, your chances of getting attacked again are also higher. Now, another question for you all. Who between new hires and tenured employees, who do you think gets attacked more? And just as a caveat here, this is looking at email phishing campaigns, right? I understand that new hires get a lot of SMS based, hey, this is CEOs who are asking for a gift card. But overall, as far as email, guesses, a lot of tenured, some new hire. All right. Tenure is right. So what you see here on the x-axis is the number of months that someone has been in an organization, and on the y-axis, you're seeing how many phishing attacks that they're receiving. And you can see that the correlation between how many phishing attacks you're receiving goes up steadily month after month that you are with an organization, roughly looking at doubling every 3 years you're with the company. Of all the data sets that we looked at, this is probably the one that jumped out the most as the strongest insight correlation, right? So the more you are with a company, the longer your email address is out in the world, right? And the higher chances you are of getting attacked. Yes, and as someone said, if you're with a company long enough, it's a good chance you might have pissed somebody off in that period of time. There's some interesting reasons, right, why you might be getting attacked more. As we're engaging in conferences, and again, externally with vendors, there's a better chance that your email is put up into the world. There's a good chance that your LinkedIn account is getting scraped, right? But it doesn't always have to be malicious sources for your information being out in the world. There's actually quite a few marketing reasons, right? Why emails get collected and aggregated and verified and sold to other marketing data providers. I've listed some vendors on the screen here. And obviously a verified email account is going to go for a higher price than just this seems to match the profile of people in this company, right? I've actually worked with a CISO who took this information, found that his most frequently attacked individuals, and also those folks who had more higher privileges and access, and worked with vendors like Delete Me to scrape those people's emails and delete them out of technologies like ZoomInfo, visitor queue, etc., so that their emails were less discoverable. Obviously not a foolproof way, but actually making it a little bit harder to find them to try to reduce their likelihood of being attacked. We also took a look at a different parameter, which was IP brute force. So this one's a little bit less spray and pray and much more, I am trying to knock down your front door. And we were taking a look at IP addresses from different unique attempts, unique addresses against certain individuals and accounts, against profile types. And what we saw is that there are two, this was a deep dive we did for one particular organization. Again, it might vary for industry to industry, but this was so blatant and obvious for this particular industry that I thought it was worth bringing up, that that the business and there's a business financial individual contributor, so someone who actually had wire transfer capabilities, and then an individual in senior IT engineering leadership. we're getting, as you can see, statistically higher brute force, IP brute force attempts coming into their organization. So when we think about attack factors, right, you can look at attempted phishing, but you're going to also look at IP attempts, right, to understand who's getting attacked more frequently in the space. And so these roles, while logical, is interesting to see that it's verified in the data set to that they're more frequently attacked. So that was the first part, right? We just took a look at who is getting more shots fired at them based on a variety of factors. So managers get attacked 2.5 times more frequently than individual contributors. Tenure is a big role. Geography has some bearing. And obviously your role, if you're in a privileged role, can get you in the crosshairs of much more sophisticated attacks. So then the next question is, can we understand who is more likely to fall for an attack? What are some attributes that we might be looking into? So the first thing that I came across was, and this one was incredibly eye-opening, but also makes a lot of sense if you think about it, is that cognitive load, stress, if you will, has a really notable impact in someone's ability to make thoughtful security choices. And there's a couple of factors that go into cognitive load. So first of all is workload, just how much do you have on your plate? And then the second piece comes from workplace distractions. How many immediate deadline and urgent things are you really focused on? And if you have an upcoming deadline with a sense of urgency, your chances of actually detecting a phishing attack falls. It statistically shows it's worse than 50%, right? So people who are just randomly guessing perform better than people who had deadlines and upcoming stress related to that. So the other two things were how your inbox was actually patterned. So if you had a high total email quantity, like you were getting bombarded with a lot of emails, you were also worse at understanding phishing attacks. But interestingly, the last one, if you were someone who rarely got phished, when you did, you were actually more likely to fall for it. So it does actually show that people who are used to combating phishing and have this guard up pretty regularly actually have some type of tolerance and resilience. So I'm thinking about roles such as an executive admin, for example, or even someone in accounting, right? They have this on their radar, but if you are rarely attacked, you have a higher chance of actually clicking on it. But we can see, at least for the first three, if you have huge unread inboxes, coming deadlines, huge workloads, your chances of actually detecting phishing are much lower. And that makes a lot of sense for those of you who are Daniel Kahneman fans and behavioral science nerds like I am. It makes a lot of sense because System 1 and System 2 are in competition when we have deadlines and workloads ahead of us. So System 1 is a place where we make many of our decisions from. It's faster, it requires less energy. It's the thing that helps us decide what we want for lunch. System 2 helps us decide where we were going to go to college, for example, or if we should take this next job offer. It's slow, it takes effort, it's logical, and our brains try our hardest to minimize System 2 thinking. If you get a particularly tricky phishing attack, you need System 2 to think through critically and say, is this right? Am I expecting this? Can I verify this? And so you actually do need to slow down and switch over to System 2 to detect that. And again, if you have so much information competing for your brain capacity, deadlines, workload, inbox, you're going to have a much harder time switching out of System 1 into System 2. So makes a lot of sense. On the topic of System 1 and System 2 and the energy that it takes, I wanted to share this research. And again, Daniel Kahneman brings this up in his book, and this has been pretty well documented. It's probably one of the more popular studies that I've seen as far as cognitive load. So what you see here is a chart that shows the cases that judges in Israel we're looking at, and the chances of them being granted parole. And it's a little bit faint here in yellow, but every time that there's a circle is when the judge has a break. And it starts early in the morning and goes all the way through lunchtime, right? Where the very last tick on the x-axis is a break for lunch. And as you can see, the chances of being granted parole are much higher right after a break. But as we get closer and closer to lunchtime, your chances go down and down and down. And the idea here is that both cognitive load, but also hunger level, right, affects our ability to make more thoughtful system 2 related choices here. And so this is an area I haven't seen directly correlated into phishing, but what I have seen is, and when we took a look at time aspects related to phishing, there really is a time pattern associated with when employees are getting targeted, when they're falling for it, and when they tend to report. And so taking a look at a sample data set, we looked at a couple dozen organizations, we could see that phishing emails tend to get delivered, they are delivered throughout the day, but around lunchtime, around 3:30, and around 5 p.m. Have some significant spikes there. I will tell you, I am not my cognitive best right before lunchtime, and so if I had a tool or a choice that would let me delay unknown senders delivered to my inbox until after lunch, I think I'd perform much better on it. But you can see phishing clicks fall to a lot actually around 7 p.m. Again, maybe distracted with dinner, family time, or happy hours. I had a friend tell me, like, Masha, can you please create a tool that knows on my calendar when I'm at a happy hour and delivers anything that is even remotely questionable with a bright red banner that says, please do not click on this until you have more cognitive ability. Still gets delivered, but helps me as an individual make better life choices. So correlating glucose in our system, which helps our brain capacity, mapped against better security decisions. So when we take a look at who is making some of these mistakes, who are making some of these mistakes, we can see that a lot of these policy violations are not malicious. Many of them are driven by stress, which we just talked about, right, in cognitive load. This is a Harvard Business Review study that was done not too long ago, and they observed a couple hundred employees over a course of a 10-day period, and 67% of the participants of this research study raised their hand at the end and said that they knowingly circumvented some cybersecurity policies at least once in that 10-day period. And when asked why, the top reasons that came up was they had family demands, job security fears. They wanted to mostly just do their job, and they felt like it was being hindered by security policies. And so the common phrases that came back was, I needed to do this to better accomplish tasks for my job, to get something I needed, to help others get work done. So again, their ultimate reasons were to actually try to be a better employee. Only 3% of the case that of people interviewed said that it wasn't out of desire to cause harm. I do want to say on this one slide, I am surprised as to who the 3% are to so bravely raise their hand in a survey. They really have to trust that the anonymity and say, yeah, I totally violated that policy to get back at somebody. But clearly somebody did raise their hand. One of the things that I also, one of the tools that I like referencing in context of this is the idea of neutralization techniques. And this helps explain why, categorically, why people do justify what they think is seemingly good behavior in violating cybersecurity policies. Now, these were not developed specifically for cybersecurity. This was actually a framework from 1950 by some researchers named Sykes and Matza, and they did this for looking at folks who were in jail, right, for a variety of different crimes, primarily petty crimes. And they came up with these 6 categories, but you can find that there's a lot of parallels to how people justify their actions as it relates to cybersecurity, right? So denial of injury, it's not a big deal. There's no harm done, so it's not a big deal. Higher loyalties, we saw a lot of that. I just wanted to help somebody, I needed to get my job done. Denial of responsibility, I didn't know, or that's not my job, that's someone's cybersecurity. Yes, that's the job of someone in cybersecurity. The ledger, right? So this one is, I mostly do security right all the time. This was just one exception. It's not a big deal. Defensive necessity, again, urgent deadlines that would justify the means to an end. And then condemning the condemners. Security is way too strict. They don't let me do my job. So what they like, so it's security's fault, right, for making me do this. So that's some interesting psychological reasons around why someone might justify risky behavior. When we do look at the 3% of people who do cause malicious action, a lot of the reasons why folks do this is because they are motivated by a desire of revenge. 84% of this of folks looking to for insider threat were due to revenge or being disgruntled, and that ties into things like being fired, passed over for promotion, demotion, workplace conflicts, or perceived lack of respect. We're getting into more insider threat kind of studies here, but emotional motivations has shown to have very high precursors of insider threat and malicious actions internally. So, okay, for this particular slide, I had a lot of heartache of putting in here, but the data is statistically sound enough that I felt like I needed to put this in. There have been a lot of studies done over the years around gender and age as a susceptibility factor to phishing attacks. And so what these 2 researchers did, Pakai and Verma, in 2023, just last year, was they took a look at hundreds of studies done over the last, I believe, 20 years. And they took a look at those that were well run. They go through their analysis as to which studies they had for inclusion and which ones that they felt were not repeatable, did not have repeatable findings, or had a questionable setup of the study. And they narrowed it down to 29 studies based on age and 35 studies on gender to see if there were any statistically significant findings across these super tight, super well-run research reports. And what they did find is that across these multiple data research sets, that younger women, so we're talking late teens, early 20s, were statistically more vulnerable to phishing attacks and online scams than any other gender or age group. And this actually tends to be counterintuitive for a lot of people who think, maybe anecdotally, that older people who might have less familiarity with technology concepts might be more susceptible. However, statistically seeing that young women, especially teenage girls into early 20s, tend to have much higher, or statistically higher, likelihood to fall for phishing. I have talked to parents who have teenage girls, and they said it tracks. So there's that. Now, for me, for anyone who's actually maybe in security awareness or implementing a program, and as it relates to behavior change and securing mindset in an organization, the question is, should we just train people more? Like how does training and people who have gone through training affect someone's likelihood to fall for an attack? And the answer is, and the answer we're trying to really focus is like, does training actually help to reduce risk? And the answer is not a black and white yes or no. It's actually shades of gray, or in this case, green to red. That for certain types of tasks, what the research shows is that one-time or narrow focus related security tasks are wonderful sources for course correction and training. So if you need to teach someone how to do better password creation, tell them not to install certain types of software, to remind them to update systems, and in a simulated environment, identify phishing. Training is a wonderful course correction. But when you drop into more loosely defined tasks, things that are continuous processes, things that require more critical thinking, back to what we were talking about, cognitive workload and mental stress, then training becomes statistically ineffective at changing behavior. So things like ongoing password management, sharing of personal information, ability to identify phishing in the real world. We similarly took a look at a data set at Elevate Security and Mimecast around efficacy of training. And the question again I get a lot is, how much training is enough? So what we saw and let me explain what you're looking at, is the x-axis here shows how many times someone has been assigned and completed a security training. The y-axis is their average click rate, average user click rate. And you can see that if you're an employee who has been assigned 1, 2, or 3 phishing or security trainings, your phishing rate has gradually gone down with the number of trainings you've taken. However, if we take a look beyond that, folks with 4 or 5 trainings assigned to them, it starts being productive and actually shows it's actually counterproductive, and phishing click rates go up. And the way that I interpret this data is that if you're an individual who needs 4 or 5 trainings on the same topic, training has stopped to be effective, and you're moving into one of those repeat clickers. There are other things going on, and it is not a knowledge gap. It is much more, there's something else going on, whether or not it's behavioral, neutralization techniques we just talked about, maliciousness, but often cognitive workload, right? So understanding that training is useful up until a point, and then it is not. The same question I often get is phishing simulation. How often do we do this? Monthly, weekly, forever that someone's at the company? And what the data shows is that phishing simulations and practicing phishing in an environment is helpful up until about 10 or 11 simulated phishings. And then it plateaus. You're going to stop seeing the efficacy for an individual as far as their click rate goes. And it hovers at about 5%, which is for programs that are consistently maintained and run. That's where I see the click rate hovering for organizations. And I will tell you, this data isn't bound by certain time periods. So we were just looking at number of phishes per individual in the company. So this is not like 10 in a month or 10 in a year. That would be a really great way to answer this. Like how much does this information expire in someone's brain? How often do you need to keep up with the practice? But how I read this data and how I interpret this is usually the first year of a phishing program in organizations, very effective, right? You are introducing this kind of testing and learning for folks in their environment. And then assuming you're phishing once a month or so, right? At the end of that year, you're going to basically get the majority of the benefits that you're going to get from program. And after that, it starts petering out. And if you're someone who is continuously clicking after having so many practice attempts, or at least not every time, but often enough, it's time to consider different kinds of interventions. And to be clear, I don't mean firing somebody. There's other ways of giving someone feedback, and I highly recommend interviewing people who are multiple time repeat offenders to understand what are some of their factors that they're trying to balance in being able to make better security decisions. You might find that it is not knowledge-based. It might be organizational-based. It might be cognitive workload-based. It might be personal stressors. But there are there are a lot of ways we can lean in and support repeat clickers that don't involve firing them, assuming that they have other value add to the organization. Okay. I want to talk about the repeat clickers thing for a little bit. The way that you can read the slide is on the left-hand side is the number of users who have clicked on at least one phishing email. Have the number of times someone has clicked on a phishing email. On the right-hand side, the number of incidents that they're that they are responsible for. So you can see in the red area, about 4% of users have clicked on 3 or more phishing emails and account for 80% of the phishing clicks that the security team has to respond to. And in the blue area, almost 80% of employees have never clicked on a phishing link, all right? And so have a very clean track record as it relates to incident response. Then you have people in the middle who have gone off track once or twice, but but are able to course correct, and they are allocated for just a very small amount of the kind of risk. So again, this is incredibly insightful because it shows that a small number of employees are causing the majority of incident and noise as it relates to phishing. I'm going to show you some other behaviors in the next few slides. But this is an excellent indication that these folks might need a different kind of intervention than maybe more training, more simulated phishing, and also the way that we handle folks in the red should be very different than the way we handle the folks in the green, and the blue. And the blue will make up the majority of our organizations today. And so understanding where someone falls in this risk distribution is incredibly insightful because it'll help you tailor your program in the areas that will drive the most number of impacts. We see a similar kind of breakdown when it relates to malware, but it's actually the discrepancy is even higher. Just under 3% of employees account for 92% of all malware incidents. Malware tends to be pretty rare, and that's a wonderful story from a security perspective. We have a lot of really great security technology and protections in place that help folks not make this kind of security mistakes. But again, you're dealing with a very small percentage of your population who make some of these risky decisions. And then browsing to sites that are blocked by policy or have alerts associated with them. A little bit of a wider distribution here, but still statistically we can see that 12% of users account for 71% of all events, and 55% of all users have never initiated a policy violation in browsing, so are much more thoughtful as it relates to their browsing habits. So again, where someone falls in sort of low, medium, high risks, incredibly valuable so we can understand how we apply which interventions go to whom. I wanted to pull a lot of these disparate factors together and share with you, this is research done by the RAND organization and just released at the start of this year. And they looked at many of the factors we already talked about, and they mapped them against two quadrants, reliability and viability. So viability is how easy is it for an organization to gather this kind of information from their workforce in a way that is repeatable, is ethical, and can actually gather enough that actually that covers the majority of the workforce. And reliability is what are the chances that this particular factor will give us a pretty good indication of someone's risk level associated with this. And so they mapped many different kinds of parameters, and then also through a series of surveys and feedback from experts in the field, pulled together this information and mapped this into categories that map this to a quadrant that put all these factors into relationship to each other. And I put this up because we did cover quite a bit of ground, everything from gender to workload to privacy, information, job titles, distractions, and from their research report, which you can, I added the sources here on the slide, This is how it mapped in their scale. There were other factors here, particularly like personal stressors, gender, age, which did not make it into the above 3 quadrant, right? And so decided these are the ones that they would recommend. Obviously, privileged information, the policies that someone has in their organization to protect individuals, and employee behavior types, who falls for attacks more often, have scored higher in their research. Okay, so to wrap us up, I want to leave you with this slide and some thoughts on pulling together this kind of analysis and insight. So my ask of you all is to not go back to your organizations and start profiling your employees based on the things that you just heard me say. It's like, well, you're a young woman who's been in this company for over 10 years, right? So we probably should lock down your account and make it harder for you to do your job, right? This is not the intent of this presentation. What it does hopefully start in your mind is the ability to understand that there are factors that statistically do indicate that some individuals are riskier, and give you areas to drill into for your own organizations. So I would ask that you look into people who are repeat offenders in certain data types, people who are getting attacked more frequently in your organization. And there's a chance that you'll find very similar findings in your organization, but it also may be different. And when you have it in your organization based on your data, much more actionable, and you can use that information to then lean in, and instead of making people's lives harder, we can apply our resources much more effectively and protect those individuals who are riskier, whether or not they're riskier because they are more likely to get attacked, or they're riskier because they have a harder time detecting it, maybe because of higher stress load. We work with those individuals on a much more tailored basis to help protect them in ways that we probably wouldn't do it at scale. Everything from, as I was mentioning, working with their accounts on delete me and trying to remove the information from third parties, to helping protect them with additional controls, step up multi-factor authentication, passwordless MFA, maybe dedicated work environments and devices, isolated web browsing. The list goes on and on. There's a lot of technologies that are out there that can help create more safe environments for individuals based on their level of risk. Okay, with that, I'm gonna pause. I know I went over time just a little bit. There's a lot more that I wanted to share than I thought. If you do want to stay in touch, LinkedIn is probably the easiest, but here's my email, and I would love to see if there's any questions that I can help answer.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation to the Cognitive Security Institute. You may learn more about topics in cognitive security by visiting us at cognitivesecurity.institute.